Good evening, everyone. St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of all the Coast Salish tribes. Good evening. I'm so glad that you are all here, and greetings to those joining via Zoom as well. My name is Steve Thomason, and I serve as the Cathedral Dean here at St. Mark's. If you need any assistance, there are several staff members in the back. I'll be around on this side as well. Just let us know how we can serve you. Water service is over here. Restrooms, women's off this side of the stage, men's off this side of the stage. All gender bathrooms are one flight or one floor up on this side, or the elevator up to the 5th floor on that side. Just see me and we will get you there if you need it. We ask that you would please silence your phones now if you've not yet. And let me tell you about another sound that might go off tonight. Our alarm system, our fire alarm system, has a fault in it. It is perfectly safe, but it sounds the trouble alarm. So if you hear an alarm, you don't need to evacuate the building. I will go punch the mute button. It's actually the acknowledge button, but it says ACK and we say button. So
recording in progress.
This cathedral stands as a house of prayer for all people, a beacon of hope in this region and for the world, a place for the arts to find expression and for the work of justice to be a gathering principle that guides who we are in the world. And as I said, I'm really glad that you're here this evening. In the great tradition of historic European cathedrals, St. Mark's strives to serve as a commons, that is, as a center for reasoned discourse, where people from the broader community can find safe haven for respectful dialogue, even when we may disagree. Diversity is welcomed here, and we are the richer for it. This evening is part of the Wisdom School at St. Mark's, the mission of which is to offer a balanced path for spiritual transformation, grounded in prayer and practice, drawing on the Christian contemplative tradition while respecting the diversity of experiences born from other traditions, religious and otherwise. Tonight we have poet and teacher Ellen Bass, of course, with the intimate web of humanity, healing, and hope being the subject. Next fall, this is our final offering for the program year, but next fall, the Wisdom School will enter its 9th year, and the theme for this fall's program year will be Crossing Thresholds. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, we all cross thresholds, and I want to say you are welcome here, and you're welcome to participate in any of the offerings, Wisdom School or otherwise, that St. Mark's offers. The flow of this evening will be threefold. First, Ellen will offer her reflections and a few poems related to the topic at hand, the intimate web of humanity, healing, and hope. We will then have a moderated question and answer session. Questions must be written down. There are note cards on the back table. If you want to ask a question, just feel free to write that down, and then we'll bring it up and we'll work through those as time allows. For folks on Zoom, just put your question in the chat box, and there's someone here on staff that's monitoring that. I doubt we'll have time for every question, but we'll look for the themes and the questions to be shared. And then finally, Ellen will be at a table in the back here in the corner for a book signing. We are grateful to Queen Anne Book Company, who is here selling Ellen's books. They're available for purchase, and let's just recognize Queen Anne Book Company as well. To facilitate Ellen signing your book, we ask that you print your name on one of the note cards and have that with your book, so that Stephen doesn't become a misspelled word on my book. That you get the point. It is our great delight to welcome Ellen Bass, poet, educator, professor in the MFA program at Pacific University, a resident of Santa Clara, California, Chancellor Emerita of the Academy of American Poets, She is the author of several books of poetry, from which I think she will read many, including her most recent volume, Indigo, and published by the Copper Canyon Press, Mules of Love as well. The Courage to Heal, a different topic matter, not poetry necessarily. The Courage to Heal, a guide for women survivors of child sexual abuse, has sold millions of copies. And this is a woman who has provided deep care and sensitivity to many, many, many people. She's a Guggenheim Fellow and also a recipient of an endowed award from the National Endowment for the Arts. Will you join me in welcoming Ellen Bass?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you all. Thanks for coming. Thank you, bookstore, our independent bookstores that we need so much. Does this sound good? Good? Okay. It's really a privilege to be here and talk about hope and healing. I was invited last September. And of course, there's always suffering in the world. It's not like it was a perfect time, but I at least had no idea how bad it was going to get. And so this topic of hope and healing seems especially a good one for tonight. I wanted to read something from the great poet Gwendolyn Brooks to start us off as a kind of touchstone. She says, "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." So I'm going to talk a little bit about what poetry can do, and then I'm going to share some poems. The role of poetry in turbulent times is to hold space for all the contradictory experiences, for the pain, the joy, and to be an agent for transformation. We write poems, we speak them, we read them, we listen to them in order to be changed. We don't want to be exactly the same afterward as we were before. We want to be able to hold our experience in a way that allows us to be more deeply rooted in the life that we're living. And we certainly know that life can be chaotic and overwhelming. And one of the things that art does, and in particular, I think about it with poetry, because that's where I think most, is that it allows us to hold experience at a manageable distance, that it's not so close that we're overwhelmed, and it's not so far away that we're just shut down and separated from our feelings. D.H. Lawrence, in his long poem, Song of a Man Who Has Come Through, writes, "What is the knocking? What is the knocking at the door in the night? It is someone wants to do us harm. No, it is the three strange angels. Admit them, admit them." And at first we hear that knocking, and if you're like me, you're afraid. We know that what life can bring can be terrifying. And we also know that if we do open that door to the range of our experience, the beauty and the pain, the love and the death, the laughter, desire, brutality, tenderness, then we don't miss out on the experience of being alive. And even if you live to be as old as me or even older, it's still a pretty short time that we get to be here. And so, one of the ways that I think about my life is that I don't want to miss out on the experience. I don't want to feel that I was going so fast or so not paying attention that I turn around and go, where did it go? I want to know where it went. I want to have been present for it, and poetry helps me to do that. The French novelist Colette said, "What a wonderful life I've had. I only wish I realized it sooner." And the great poet Rainer Maria Rilke said, "Do I seem to be getting louder and softer back and forth when I look up and down? Okay, maybe I'm going to try and hold this up a little bit so that it doesn't feel like you're getting seasick on the ocean." Rilke said, "Oh, tell me, poet, what do you do? I praise. But those dark, deadly, devastating ways, how do you bear them, suffer them? I praise." So this praise is the practice of being open to our lives, by which we can be more deeply and more acutely awake to the human experience. And as the philosopher Simone Weil said, absolute attention is prayer. So this is the essential pull, the essential tension of poetry and of life. How do we praise the world and be simultaneously aware of all the suffering? Both in the writing of a poem and in the reading of a poem, the speaking or hearing, this is what we're seeking, to enlarge our capacity for holding this depth and this complexity. Our capacity to savor the moment, even when we know that the next moment might bring disappointment or even disaster. The Buddhist teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche said, "If you can hold the pain of the world in your heart and never forget the vastness of the great eastern sun, then you can make a proper cup of tea." So that's what we're going to try and do this evening, is make some tea together. I'm going to read some poems. Relax. Bad things are going to happen. Your tomatoes will grow a fungus and your cat will get run over. Someone will leave the bag with the ice cream melting in the car and throw your blue cashmere sweater in the dryer. Your husband will sleep with a girl your daughter's age, her breasts spilling out of her blouse. Or your wife will remember she's a lesbian and leave you for the woman next door. The other cat, the one you never really liked, will contract a disease that requires you to pry open its feverish mouth every 4 hours. Your parents will die. No matter how many vitamins you take, how much Pilates, you'll lose your keys, your hair, and your memory. If your daughter doesn't plug her heart into every live socket she passes, you'll come home to find your son has emptied the refrigerator, dragged it to the curb, and called the used appliance store for a pickup. Drug money. The Buddha tells a story of a woman chased by a tiger. When she comes to a cliff, she sees a sturdy vine and climbs halfway down. But there's also a tiger below, and 2 mice, one white, one black, scurry out and begin to gnaw at the vine. At this point, she notices a wild strawberry growing from a crevice. She looks up, down at the mice. Then she eats the strawberry. So here's the view, the breeze, the pulse in your throat. Your wallet will be stolen. You'll get fat. Slip on the bathroom tiles in a foreign hotel and crack your hip. You'll be lonely. Oh, taste how sweet and tart the red juice is, how the tiny seeds crunch between your teeth. Now, I have this feeling that my bones are clacking. Do you hear that? I'm going to assume that my neck is not really going to fall off. But I wonder if I have this up too high. It's okay. You're not, the clacking is not a problem. Okay, then just don't worry about me. I think I'm fine. Okay. This next poem came from a true story. Many of them do, although not everything in every poem is true. Somebody's teenage daughter came in and she had my book that relaxes in on the kitchen table, and the daughter, picked it up and read the poem, and she said to her mom, "Did all of that happen to her?" Youth. Oh. So this is called If You Knew. What if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along the lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt. They'd just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block, and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? This next poem I wrote quite a while back, and it was included in an anthology that I want to, well, not exactly an anthology, but, well, I guess an anthology. Now, little peeks into my mind. This wonderful book that I really highly recommend is called All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And it's essays by women leaders on climate all around the United States in all various fields: lawyers, farmers, activists, scientists, journalists. And one of the exciting things about the book is that it's all about solutions, that people who are actually doing something. And they chose to include poems in the book, which I thought was really wonderful, because they were thinking it's not just about our rational minds, it's also, how do we hook up our feelings and our thinking about it. So it's called All We Can Save. It's really good. And I was very, very happy that they included this poem. It's called The Big Picture. I try to look at the big picture, the sun, ardent tongue, licking us like a mother besotted with her new cub will wear itself out. Everything is transitory. Think of the meteor that annihilated the dinosaurs. And before that, the volcanoes of the Permian period. All those burnt ferns and reptiles, sharks and bony fish. That was extinction on a scale that makes our losses look like a bad day at the slots. And perhaps we're slated to ascend to some kind of intelligence that doesn't need bodies or clean water or even air. But I can't shake my longing for the last 600 Iberian lynx with their tufted ears, Brazilian guitar fish, the 4% of them still cruising the seafloor, eyes staring straight up. And all the newborn marsupials, red kangaroos, joeys the size of honeybees, steelhead trout, river dolphins, so many species of frogs breathing through their damp, permeable membranes. Today on the bus, a woman in a sweater the exact shade of cardinals, and her cardinal-colored bra strap exposed on her pale shoulder make me ache for those bright flashes in the snow. And polar bears, the cream and amber of their fur, the long hollow hairs through which sun slips, swallowed into their dark skin. When I get home, my son has a headache, and though he's almost grown, asks me to sing him a song. We lie together on the lumpy couch, and I warble out the old show tunes, night and day. They can't take that away from me. A cheap silver chain shimmers across his throat, rising and falling with his pulse. There never was anything else, only these excruciatingly insignificant creatures we love. Well, that's the big picture, and this is the little picture. This is also an absolutely true story. Kiss. When Lynn saw the lizard floating in her mother-in-law's swimming pool, she jumped in. And when it wasn't breathing, its body limp as a baby drunk on milk, she laid it on her palm and pressed one fingertip to its silky breast with just about the force you need to test the ripeness of a peach, only quicker. A brisk little push with a bit of spring to it. Then she knelt, dripping wet in her Doc Martens and camo t-shirt with the neck ripped out, and bent her face to the lizard's face, her big plush lips to the small stiff jaw that she'd pried apart with her opposable thumb, and she blew a tiny puff into the lizard's lungs. The sun glared against the turquoise water. What did it matter if she saved one lizard more or less in the world? But she bestowed the kiss of life again and again until the lizard's wrinkled lids peeled back, its muscles roused its own first breath, and she set it on the hot cement where it rested a moment before darting off. Yeah, that's the kind of friend you want. I always wanted to write about oysters, and I always wanted to write about reincarnation. And finally, there was a time when they came together. And this is called reincarnation. Who would believe in reincarnation if she thought she would return as an oyster? Eagles and wolves are popular. Even domesticated cats have their appeal. It's not terribly distressing to imagine being Missy, nibbling kibble and lounging on the windowsill. But I doubt the toothsome oyster has ever been the totem of any shaman fanning the mother-piece tarot or smudging with sage. Yet perhaps we could do worse than aspire to be a plump bivalve. All of a sudden, I've read this poem many times, but all of a sudden, the bivalve was so plump in my mind that I had to crack up. Humbly, the oyster persists in filtering seawater and fashioning the daily irritations into luster. Dash a dot of Tabasco, pair it with a dry martini. Not only will this tender button inspire an erotic fire in tuxedoed men and women whose shoulders gleam in candlelight, this hermit praying in its rocky cave, this anchorite of iron, calcium, and protein is practically a molluscan saint, revered and sacrificed, body and salty liquor of the soul. The oyster is devoured, surrendering all again and again. I was asked some years back to start a poetry workshop at Salinas Valley State Prison, which is not too far from where I live in Santa Cruz. It's used to be called Soledad, and it was spring in Santa Cruz. And I've been walking around Seattle today, and my God, everything is in blossom. And I mean, Santa Cruz does not blossom quite the way Seattle blossoms. It has other pleasures, but I mean, this is like, you know, unbelievable. But it's still in Santa Cruz. It was pretty wonderful with the blossoming. And I just, it just hurt my heart so much that that the men I was in workshop with couldn't see any of that. And you never knew what you could take in and what you couldn't, because it depended on who was on duty and how they felt that day. But I thought I'd give it a try. And this poem came out of me bringing flowers into the prison. Somehow or another, I was able to get them past the guard. Bringing flowers to Salinas Valley State Prison. When Mr. H saw the little meadow blooming on the steel table, he bowed to the starry faces of jasmine. This is the first flower I've smelled in 20 years. And when I slid each man a bouquet in a paper cup, Mr. M said, I'll have such a short time with these. We spoke then about beauty and loss, the great themes of poetry. And when our time was done and the guards said they had to leave the flowers, most of the men acquiesced. But Mr. S insisted he had, as a Native American, a right to his rituals: sage, sweet corn, tobacco. And no one could stop him. It was the law, from taking these sacred plants back to his cell. Then he raised his cup and drank the water the flowers were drinking. And a small wind stirred in that windowless room as we watched Mr. S quietly bite the heads off the Peruvian lilies, crushing their pink sepals and the gold inner petals flecked with maroon, swallowing the silvery filaments, their dark, pollen-laden anthers, his mouth frothing with blossoms. It makes me think of you saying poetry is resistance, so Mr. S figured it out. I think all the arts offer a kind of door into attention. That is that prayer that Simone Weil was talking about. And in this next poem, it was music that gave me that opening into attention. This poem is called During the Pandemic. I listened to the July 26th, 1965 Juan Lapin recording of A Love Supreme. The first familiar know them anywhere notes bless me this savage morning. Coltrane's horn racing up and down every alley, in and out of veins and over the faces of lakes and into the heart of stones. And when he repeats a love supreme again and again, it's as though if he says it enough, he can ease that mercy down into me, into the tiny acicular chain, the chemical rush, the spark, and my brain getting it, if even just for this 32 minutes and 48 seconds. My daughter has been sick 7 weeks with the virus. Yesterday, she felt a little bored, she texted, and I grabbed that like a shopping cart. I loaded up with hope. Make it prayer. When the day's portion of the Torah is recited, someone stands by to correct mistakes. The words must vibrate precisely in the air. So I open my door to the breath of his instrument that refuses nothing, lavishing the grass, gutters and trees, concrete cars, the gopher pulling down the new lettuces. This generous sound that can mean anything, nothing, whatever you need. And isn't that God? Isn't that it? This shivering, this fall to my knees. Gods do walk among us, but humans are, after all, a broken promise. And yet, These humans seem to be trying to enter what? I can almost hear it. This old planet. Worms passing Earth through their tissue, orchids, corn, mockingbirds throwing themselves into song like there's no tomorrow, which there may not be. Yet, still a mountain, still wind, and Coltrane's still offering the same four notes like a teacher who is infinitely patient. He's telling me it's worth it to be in a body. He's telling me I'm alive in a beach town in California, and my daughter in a high-rise in Vancouver, my girl lying feverish on the couch she's been lying on 49 days and 49 nights, still alive. When I time these things at home, it's like when they go up in the rocket and time is different, which I never really understood. But in my house, time takes 3 times as long. So there's time for 3 times as many poems. I don't know how it works. Okay, but I'm going to make some choices. My wife and I have been together for 41 years, and I knew her as a friend for 9 years before that. So we're talking half a century. But we're slow learners, so it took a couple of couple decades for me to really get a certain thing. And when I did, it really opened up my poetry. And what I got is that when she irritates me, there's often a poem. And so, and once it really was like a eureka moment. And I've written quite a few since then. And this is one that started out. So now I have, just like a 3-second lag before I go into irritation. And in that 3 seconds, I go, is there something I can do with this? And then if so, I speed away and see what I can do. So hearing aids. Hearing aids is the irritation that started it off. If any of you are married to people who do not wear their hearing aids, you'll be able to relate to this. It's called taking off the front of the house. I'm at the kitchen table drinking strong tea, eating eggs with poppy gold yolks from our chickens, Marilyn and Estelle. There's a red car parked across the street and my neighbor's gorgeous irises, their frilled tongues tasting the air. Monsanto is suing Vermont, I say, turning the pages of the Times. I say it loud because Janet's in the living room, in the faded chair the cat has scratched into hay, eating yogurt and the strawberries she brought home from the field, where she labors to relieve the tender berry of its heavy chemical load. What, she says? She isn't wearing her hearing aids, so I take a breath and project my voice. And as I enunciate the corporate evils, suddenly the front of the house is sheared away. We're on a stage, the audience seated on the asphalt of Young Love Avenue, watching this quirky couple eat their breakfast and yell back and forth from one room to another. And throughout the day, as I throw a load of laundry in the dryer, answer the phone, as she lies on the couch reading Great Expectations, and we bicker about the knocking in the pipes and whether we really need to call a plumber. I admire how the actor who plays the character of me and the actor who plays the character of her perform our parts so perfectly in this production that will last just a little while before it closes for good. And when night comes, we smoke a little weed, something called thunderfuck, which must be someone's high opinion of himself. but in truth, it's quite nice. Though we only take a couple tokes since Janet's on blood pressure medication, and she can't do the way she did at 20 when she slung a goatskin bag over her shoulder and wandered around Senegal in flip-flops. As I reach for her, she says, now the audience can sit on the back deck by the barbecue, and this play can be called The Old Lesbians Go to Bed at the End of the Day. I light the candle her mother gave me for my last birthday when she could still put on her lipstick. The set is authentic, a messy stack of books on my nightstand. On her side, the hearing aids that sit there all day. And as she turns toward me and I feel again the marvelous architecture of her hips, the moon, that expert in lighting, rises over the roofline, flooding us in her flawless silvery wash. So this is another poem that I have my wife to thank for. I can't remember what she did. It was very, very trivial, but I felt that it was like she should just say, I'm sorry, just like a little, I'm sorry. And she didn't seem to be able to do that. And again, I thought, So it's called How to Apologize. Cook a large fish. Choose one with many bones. A skeleton you will need skill to expose. Maybe the flying silver carp that's invading the Great Lakes, tumbling the others into oblivion. If you don't live near a lake, you'll have to travel. Walking is best and shows you mean it. But you could take a train and let yourself be soothed by the rocking on the rails. It's permitted to receive solace for whatever you did or didn't do. Pitiful, beautiful, human. When my mother was in the hospital, my daughter and I had to clear out the home she wouldn't return to. Then she recovered and asked, incredulous, how could you have thrown out all my shoes? So you'll need a boat. You could rent or buy. But for the sake of repairing the world, build your own. Thin strips of Western red cedar are perfect, but don't cut a tree. There'll be a demolished barn or down trunk if you venture further, and someone will have a mill, and someone will loan you tools. The perfume of sawdust and the curls that fall from your plane will sweeten the hours. Each night, we dream 36 billion dreams. In one night, we could dream back everything lost. So grill the pale flesh, unharness yourself from your weary stories, then carry the oily, succulent fish to the one you hurt. There is much to fear as a creature caught in time, but this is safe. You need no defense. This is just another way to know you are alive. This next poem is the title poem to my most recent book, Indigo. And, I talked about that a poem should change you. And, truth in advertising, not every poem I write changes me in a way that feels discernible. But the most important ones, it feels to me, do. And this one felt like it did its work of transformation, and my daughter figures in here, and it feels like it shifted something between us as well. So I'm appreciative to this poem for that. It's called Indigo. As I'm walking on West Cliff Drive, a man runs toward me, pushing one of those jogging strollers with shock absorbers so the baby can keep sleeping, which this baby is. I can just get a glimpse of its almost translucent eyelids. The father is young, a jungle of indigo and carnelian, tattooed from knuckle to jaw, leafy vines and blossoms, saints and symbols. Thick wooden plugs pierce his lobes, and his sunglasses testify to the radiance haloed around him. I'm so jealous, as I often am. It's a kind of obsession. I want him to have been my child's father. I want to have married a man who wanted to be in a body, who wanted to live in it so much that he marked it up like a book, underlining, highlighting, writing in the margins, I was here. Not like my dead ex-husband who was always fighting against the flesh, who sat for hours on his zafu chanting Om, and then went out and broke his hand punching the car. I imagine when this galloping man gets home, he's going to want to have sex with his wife who slept in late, and then he'll eat barbecued ribs and let the baby teeth on a bone while he drinks a dark beer. I can't stop wishing my daughter had had a father like that. I can't stop wishing I'd had that life. Oh, I know. It's a miracle to have a life, any life at all. It took 8 years for my parents to conceive me. First there was the war, and then just waiting. And my mother's bones so narrow, she had to be slit, and I airlifted. That anyone is born, each precarious success from sperm and egg to zygote, embryo, infant is a wonder. And here I am, alive, almost 70 years, and nothing has killed me. Not the car I totaled running a stop sign or the spirochete that screwed into my blood. Not the tree that fell in the forest exactly where I was standing, my best friend shoving me backwards so I fell on my ass as it crashed. I'm alive, and I gave birth to a child. So she didn't get a father who'd sling her onto his shoulder, and so much else she didn't get. I've cried most of my life over that. And now there's everything that we can't talk about. We love, but cannot take too much of each other. Yet she is the one who, when I asked her to kill me if I no longer had my mind, we were on our way into Ross shopping for dresses. That's something she likes, and they all look adorable on her. She's the only one who didn't hesitate or refuse or waver or flinch. As we strode across the parking lot, she said, okay, but when's the cutoff? That's what I need to know. Well, not only does my wife irritate me, but of course I irritate her. Equal opportunity irritation. And one of the things that she's always saying is, come out of your cave, which is what she calls my office. We have this lovely backyard, come out into the world, touch dirt, get out here. And one day, I guess she was tired of saying that, and our peach tree had just made the first peach, and she brought it in, and she didn't say this, but it was kind of like, well, if you won't come out, I will bring it to you. And she hands me this peach, and she says, here, write about this. So I don't know what I would do if I didn't have her, how I would ever be a poet. So this is called Ode to the First Peach. Only one insect has feasted here. A clear stub of resin plugs the scar, and the hollow where the stem was severed shines with juice, the fur still silvered like a caul. Even in the next minute, the hairs will darken, turn more golden in my palm. Heavier this flesh than you would imagine, like the sudden weight of a newborn. Oh, what a marriage of citron and blush. It could be a planet reflected through a hall of mirrors, or what a swan becomes when a fairy shoots it from the sky at dawn. At the beginning of the world, when the first dense pith was ravished, and the stars were not yet lustrous coins fallen from the pockets of night, who could have dreamed this would be carried from the chaos, scent of morning and sugar, bruise and hunger, silent, swollen, clefted life, remnant always remaking itself out of that first flaming ripeness. This is a poem I wrote some years back. My wife had a long, harrowing illness, and I wrote this poem as she was recovering. It's called Marriage. When you finally, after long suffering, lay the length of your body on mine, isn't it like the strata of earth, the pressure of time on sand, mud, bits of shell, the moving water, wind, ice that carries the minutes, minerals that fuse sediment to rock? How to bear the weight with every flake of bone pressed in. Oh, love, it is balm and it seals. It binds us tight as the fur of a rabbit to a rabbit. When you strip it, grasping the edge of the sliced skin, pulling the glossy membranes apart, the body is warm and limp. If you could, you'd climb inside that wet, slick skin and carry it on your back. This is not neat and white and lacy like a wedding, not the bright effervescence of champagne spilling over the throat of the bottle. This visceral, bloody union that is love, but beyond love, beyond charm and delight, the way you to yourself are beyond charm and delight. This is the shucked meat of love, the alleys and broken glass of love, the dizzy hoarse cry, the stubborn hunger. And I will end with this poem. It's called Any Common Desolation. Any common desolation can be enough to make you look up at the yellowed leaves of the apple tree, the few that survived the rains and frost, shot with late afternoon sun. They glow a deep orange gold against a blue so sheer a single bird would rip it like silk. You may have to break your heart, but it isn't nothing to know even one moment alive. The sound of an oar in an oarlock, or a ruminant animal tearing grass, the smell of grated ginger, the ruby neon of the liquor store sign, warm socks. You remember your mother, her precision a ceremony, as she gathered the white cotton, slipped it over your toes, drew up the heel, turned the cuff. A breath can uncoil as you walk across your own muddy yard, the Big Dipper pouring night down over you, and everything you dread, all you can't bear, dissolves, and like a needle slipped into your vein, that sudden rush of the world. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. We'll have time for Q&A. Again, if you came in late, there are index cards on the back table. If you have a question, just please write that down. If you're on Zoom, you put it in chat, and they'll bring those up to us as well. So I have a couple of questions as we're curating the first few. The first is, have you actually really skinned a rabbit?
I have.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, as some of you know, I also killed 88 Cornish hens, but that's another story. My son was raising rabbits for meat. He was a farmer for a little while, but this was a new venture for him, and he was so good to these rabbits. He lived up in Santa Rosa. It gets hot up there, and so he'd be working at the farm, and he'd run home midday and get like a block of ice and put a t-shirt over it so the rabbits could kind of go up against that. And, I mean, he loved these rabbits, but he was raising them for meat. And he had never skinned a rabbit. I mean, never killed a rabbit, and neither had I. And, but he knew that we have a division, many marriages have a division of labor. And my wife, Janet, does everything up to a certain point. And then when it gets past that point, it's me, and I always look like the prissy one, who doesn't want to lift anything or, get under anything. But when when something has to be killed or an animal has to be sewn back together or something, that's my job. So he asked me if I would come up and help him do it. And I did. And it was pretty brutal because we really, we watched a lot of YouTube, but we didn't have the hang of it too well in the beginning. And but we did our very best, and we did skin the rabbits. And I mean, he's a strong kid, so he ate his rabbit the very next night. I had to put my rabbit in the freezer for a while before I felt like I could actually cook it and eat it. But I did also work on. I didn't do a great job of it, but I did a good enough job of tanning the skin. So I don't want to give it to my granddaughter yet because I think she's too squeamish still. But when she's older, I'll give her the rabbit skin.
And I just wanted to check in. You said that you would prefer to stand for the Q&A.
Yeah,
so
okay.
so
Yeah,
we're good. Yep.
Yeah.
You referenced yesterday you were with a group of clergy and you mentioned Simone Weil's quote about attention. And again tonight, and at dinner, you were talking about walking the city and just how do you hone your practice of attention, your awareness, and how does that translate into the imagery that you place into your poems, like skinning a rabbit or the flower or whatever?
Wow. That's a hard question. People always say that's a good question. That's a hard question. I can't say that I walk around all the time on the kind of deeply present way that would allow me to see everything. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old grandchild, and the little one, the first thing that he ever said was, "Oh, wow." and it's still what he says. He now says no, but he also still says a lot, "Oh, wow." And I don't know what "oh, wow" means exactly to a 1-year-old, but the sound of it feels like, oh, wow. So I think, that's the kind of attention that I would like to feel more, cultivate more. And sometimes I can, but I think that a lot of it comes to me and kind of says to me, this is a poem. And like in this poem, how did the rabbit get in there? That's the discovery part of writing, of not saying to yourself, you could be writing this poem and say to yourself, I really can't put a skinning rabbit in this poem. I mean, that would be like a rational thing to say. But, once the rabbit, one of the things that I cultivate is allowing in anything that wants to come in. And then I can always ask it to leave if it doesn't really hold for me or perhaps for others, but really allowing it to come in. And once the rabbit came in, it did feel to me like it was just that bloody and gory and that close,
that union.
That union was like that. And then that feeling of we talked about this just a little bit yesterday of, sometimes what someone needs from you is more and longer and more intense. I'm sure some of you have experienced similar things than you really feel like you want to give. And that feeling of, just, you can kind of read that part both ways, like who is the one in the skin, who is getting the skin wrapped around them. And it sort of goes back and forth in a certain kind of way. I thought of it one way, but when people have talked to me about that poem, they sometimes see it the other way. That we talked about that just a little bit yesterday too, that you can't control how somebody reads your poem. And sometimes people say things that are astonishing to me and but always interesting. Even if I think that is like so far from what I thought I was talking about, it still is so kind of wonderful. That because that's how we do live our lives too, right? I mean, what I notice isn't going to be what you notice, isn't going to be what you notice, because we're coming so much from our own life and subjectivity and what we feel that moment. And I'm sure you've experienced this where you read something one year and you read it 2 years later and you can't believe it's the same thing you read because it strikes you so differently because of what's going on with you.
One of your poems, and I didn't catch the title, you mentioned humans are a broken promise, but still worth being in the body. I think that was the.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that? Broken promise.
Yeah.
And yet you're still here, and with the healing and hope being the themes. How are we?
Yeah. This is another one, I mean, I can't say that I'm like enlightened to this idea, but so much that annoys me is such an opportunity. And I never would have written this poem except that my neighbors were having this very loud gathering. We're very lucky. On one side of us, they're hardly ever there because it's a second home and it's been in their family for a long time. But when they come to party. And, so I put on my Bose headphones and just kept listening to A Love Supreme. And if they hadn't been annoying me with all their noise, once again. But I say here, yes, gods do walk among us, but humans are, after all, a broken promise. And yet these humans seem to be trying to enter what? So, yeah, I mean, I think we're a flawed species, I do. I think that my own just personal opinion is that certain parts of our intelligence progressed so much further than other parts of our brains that are needed to keep the earth from being completely destroyed, to keep us from destroying so many other species and pretty much being at war most of the time. Which, when you consider what we are capable of doing with our intelligence, and then, you know, how much mess we make and how much tragedy and suffering, it seems to me that we're kind of a screwed up species. Uh, and yet, you know, we have someone like Coltrane, you know, playing a Love Supreme, and you know, you just go, oh wow.
Yeah. Maybe that's a segue to this question. We are a broken promise. We are a flawed species. Did poetry help you to write The Courage to Heal? Ethereal with substantive and spacious versus concrete.
No, poetry did not help me write The Courage to Heal. In fact, Laura Davis, my co-author, and I wrote The Courage to Heal together, and I didn't know how to write prose, and I didn't know how to write the kind of prose that I think of as functional, where you have you actually are not trying to discover something. You actually know something that somebody else might need to know. And so the whole point is to present it in a way that will be the clearest and easiest for them to have this information. And I came starting it as a poet with these long flowing lines, you know, that had phrase after phrase after phrase and metaphors. And I just had to, you know, stamp it all out because it was in the way and it made it less easy. I mean, the whole idea was for The Courage to Heal was to have the language not be dumbed down in any way, but to have it not call any attention to itself and just be, you know, as much as possible a clear window. And so it was not really a help.
Which do you find more difficult or more challenging?
Poetry. Yeah, I mean, The Courage to Heal was not easy to write. It took both of us 3 years, and you know, most of our time, I couldn't write any poetry during that time. It was so demanding, and long days working. But if you put in a day, you got a day's worth. And poetry is, you know, a crapshoot. You know, you can put in a lot of days and get nothing. But I mean, as I tell my students, and what I've learned over the years is that I believe this is certainly true in my life. Nothing is wasted as a poet working. You know, all my days where no poems come out, where no good lines come out, you know, they're all practice for the one that does work. And so, you know, but you don't get any feeling at the end of a poetry writing day where you don't even have like a good line. You don't get a feeling like, okay, I'm one day closer, you know, whereas, you know, writing that kind of fun, I mean, you know, I think writing creative nonfiction is very different. Writing a novel or short stories is really different, but that kind of functional writing is just a question of, you know, clocking your hours and just working.
That's a good segue to a couple of questions about the craft. How many poems do you find yourself working on at one time? And how do you know when a poem is finished?
Oh, I'm often working on more than one. I really love the process of when I have a poem that is kind of goes from the beginning to the middle to the end, but there's still a lot to work out, you know, because then you can kind of, I'm a worker bee, you know, then you can kind of work at it. And there are days when I really don't feel like I have any new thoughts, ideas accessible to me. So I can then just kind of chip away, you know, just work at something. So often I'm trying to start a new poem, but also working on old poem. And I work on old poems sometimes for a really long time. Anywhere from days to years. And I know that the poem is finished when I can't, at that point, get it any better. When that's like my personal best at that point with my skill set at the level that it's at, that's as good as I can get it. And then it either is a keeper or it goes into the poetry cemetery. And the poetry cemetery is a much larger country than the keepers.
Around here, we believe in resurrection.
Good. And yes. There are poems that have gone in there and then they have come back out for another try. They have come back out for another
Or
try.
reincarnation as an oyster.
That's right. I have one poem and it's ironic. The poem's called Failure. But I worked on that poem from time to time, not like consecutively, that would be truly insanity, but for a dozen years. And, every once in a while I'd take it back out again. Every few years I'd give it another shot. And then finally it came through.
And when might we expect your next book?
I would like to know the answer to that question. I don't know. Today I was thinking maybe if everything went really, really, really well, maybe it could be 27. And if not, maybe it could be 28. That's a hopeful. I mean, I do have some poems toward it.
Yeah.
I do have some. I found it very hard to write during the early years of the pandemic. I know some people wrote whole books during that time, and other people had more the experience that I had of just being kind of in some kind of paralysis. So I kind of got slowed down, but I feel like it's going better. I didn't discover it. I discovered an affinity for the form of poetry that is not lineated, the prose poem. And I've just been finding that certain things that it seemed like I just couldn't write in lines, that I'm being able to, there's something so modest about a paragraph, it doesn't like flash at you, I'm a poem. And so I've been writing some of those and it feels really good.
Would you be willing to come back to the Wisdom School when that's out?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, in a second.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
So in just a moment, as we conclude, just remember if you want to purchase books, Queen Anne Book Company is there. And then Ellen will go back, and if you'll write your name on a card, then she'll sign your card. Not a time for lengthy conversations, because then the people in the back will be here till 2026 or 27. Would you give us?
Then they can buy both books.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Ellen, would you give us maybe just one more poem as an encore before?
Oh,
we
I would
finish?
love to.
Thank you.
I'd love to. Thank you. Let's see. Who didn't get a chance? Okay, I'll read this poem. This is called When You Return. When you return, fallen leaves will climb back into trees. Shards of the shattered vase will rise and reassemble on the table. Plastic raincoats will refold into their flat envelopes. The egg, bald yolk, and its transparent halo slide back into the thin calcium shell. Curses will pour back into mouths, letters unwrite themselves, words siphoned up into the pen. My gray hair will darken and become the feathers of a black swan. Bullets will snap back into their chambers, the powder tamped tight in brass casings. Borders will disappear from maps. Rust revert to oxygen and time. The fire return to the log to the tree, the white root curled up in the unsplit seed. Birdsong will fly into the lark's lungs. Answers become questions again. When you return, sweaters will unravel and wool grow on the sheep. Rock will go home to mountain, gold to vein, wine crushed into the grape, oil pressed into the olive, silk reeled into the spider's belly. Night moths tucked close into cocoons, ink drained from the indigo tattoo. Diamonds will be returned to coal, coal to rotting ferns, rain to clouds, light to stars, sucked back and back into one timeless point, the way it was before the world was born. That fresh, that whole, nothing broken, nothing torn apart. Thank you.
Helen, thank you again. Thank you so much. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, and greetings and good night to those on Zoom as well. Thank you.
I'm going to take my